Hello, everybody. I want to tell you about the moral panic concept usage in the academic discourse. And I represent the Center for the Modern Childhood Studies, Higher School of Economics, and my name is Oxana Mikhaylova. The moral panic is an intense, heightened sense of exaggerated concern about a threat or supposed threat posed by deviants or folk devils, a category of people who presumably engage in evil practices and are responsible for menacing the physical safety or the culture or the way of life of society or sectors of society. And this concept was introduced in 1970s by two scholars, one criminologist and sociologist, and after a while it became very popular among the representatives of the other academic disciplines, lay people, and media. Therefore, scholars who belong to different research fields, they started to analyze the applicability of the moral panic concept to the scientific investigations. As you see on the slide, there were produced different studies that question the status of the moral panic concept in different discursive fields. In the sociology, there was also the discussion on the relevance of this concept for sociological examinations. It was argued that there is now the erosion of the meaning of this concept and something should be made about that. However, Garland, Krinsky, McLaughlin, and Yefanov, who conducted the research investigating the sociological discourse on moral panic, they didn't provide the clear description of the methodology, so it's difficult to rely on the results of the research. In this concrete investigation, I also decided to analyze how the concept of moral panic is used in scientific studies. For that purpose, I examined 1,296 articles that mention moral panic and are present in the Web of Science base. And to understand in what context the moral panic concept is used, I utilized semantic network analysis and thematic qualitative analysis. Also, in addition to this, I analyzed who speaks about the moral panic, and for that purpose, I used social network analysis. Looking at the diagram, you probably see that in 2000s there was the most research published on the topic of the moral panic. So, what are the results? Here you see first part of the results of my research connected with the countries which write about the moral panic. And on the left side of the slide, there are countries that are engaged in the discussion of the moral panic. Most of them belong to the developed economically countries. And these are USA, Britain, and Australia. In general, such a pattern of prevalence of economically developed countries is very typical for the other research fields, not only the moral panic one. But we could say that there is definitely some economic inequality in the research of the moral panic. So that leads to the situation then these economically developed countries, they dictate how the moral panic should be researched and in general how this concept should be used. And on the right part of the slide, you see the network of connections between the most cited countries. As you probably acknowledge, USA, England, and Australia are not only the leaders in terms of the quantity of publications published, they are also are leading in the quantity of citations. And the Pearson coefficient between citations and documents also is very high. And it means that, of course, it's very difficult to establish now a new position for the person that starts to study moral panic because there are certain old leaders that are highly cited and that produce a lot of papers. So as for the disciplines, it could be seen that since 1972 till 2019, sociology was one of the most important disciplines in the studies of the moral panic, and it was dominating the other disciplines such as criminology and penology till recent times. However, through time, the other disciplines started to be engaged in the studies of the moral panic. And we do not see, unfortunately, here among these disciplines psychology. And psychology is very important in terms of the development of moral panic theory. Why? Because it helps to understand better how the public perceives the moral panic discourses constructed by media or the other actors. And about the media and other actors' engagement in the moral panic construction, we know well from communication science and sociology. However, this perception element is still not elaborated enough. Among the organizations that operate in the field of the moral panic research, there are also those that belong to USA and to Britain. Also, it could be seen that among the organization's leaders is the Microsoft Research Corporation. It is explained by the paper that was written by Theresa Sanft, who has one of the most cited papers in the field of moral panic, but her research is not devoted to the moral panic per se. Her research is devoted to the digital studies. As for the journals that are popular in the moral panic field, these journals were mostly issued in the beginning of 2005, and not many of them have the papers that were issued recently. So, among the journals that are relevant for the moral panic research are journals devoted to health studies, qualitative health research, Journal of Behavioral Addictions, and it could be said that probably in the future we will also see the increase in the papers devoted to the moral panic in the health context. I think it's also important in terms of the quarantines and global pandemic situation. And finally, as for the authors that write in this field, it's also significant to mention that the authors that are most cited in the field also do not write directly about the moral panic. Durant, George, Bain, Nancy, and the others. The papers are devoted to such topics as migration, cyber aggression, and digital natives. So here on the slide we see results of the thematic analysis, and the speech markers in the table, they represent the words from the semantic networks. Semantic networks were constructed on the basis of abstracts. We took abstracts in combination with the keywords from the articles, because not all of the papers in the base were suggested the keywords. So the biggest topic around among the theoretical and methodological context was connected with the integration of the moral panic theory with the other theories and concepts. And although it's quite wide, the socio-psychological approach in it is still not very developed. It means that the problem that I already indicated with the under-research of the public of the moral panics is really visible even here in the analysis of the contexts in which the moral panic concept is used. Speaking about the empirical context, there is an important note that children and youth are the most present topic among the others, and this shows that there is no erosion that is mentioned by the moral panic scholars. This classical topic for a moral panic research is still the most popular. Most papers are devoted to that topic. Also very, very voluminous in terms of the papers, the topics of crimes and health, and as I mentioned, I suppose that in the future the health context will be even bigger. So my question in the beginning was about the relevance of the moral panic concept, about its usage, about the actors that employ this concept in their investigations. And it could be argued about three important conclusions that we can make from this bibliometric research. First of all, we could see that there is the economical inequality among the countries that are involved in the production of papers devoted to the moral panic. This means that certain economically developed countries dictate the others how to use the moral panic concept. This could be said on the basis of the domination in the field. Secondly, it's important to notice that from the thematic analysis and from the journal analysis, it is visible that the health context in the moral panic studies will develop probably in the future and will become the most important one in the moral panic research. The third note is connected with the interdisciplinary nature of the moral panic research. Although the moral panic concept was based initially on several disciplines, sociology, criminology, and Cohen also integrated in that the psychology of catastrophes, there is still the problem that sociology dominates among the other disciplines in terms of the usage of the moral panic concept. And probably because of that, the people's perception of the moral panic discourse is still under-examined. And we know only information about the propagation of certain discourses, but we don't know how people react to these discourses and decide to what moral panics to add or to not to add, in what moral panics to participate. So it still needs to be investigated. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer all of your questions by email or face-to-face.